How's it going, everyone? And in this video we're going to be asking the question, which COVID-19 vaccine is best? And before we get down to the answer to that question, it helps us to ask the purpose of what our vaccine is supposed to do. And so in this case, the purpose of a vaccine is to reduce the number of deaths and to also reduce the number of hospitalizations. And for every single vaccine out there, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna, AstraZeneca, you've got some others, all of these vaccines have accomplished those two goals. The degree to which they've accomplished those two goals has also been something that isn't really an apples-to-apples comparison, because a lot of people look at these efficacy numbers and they see 94-95% for Pfizer and Moderna, and then they look at Johnson & Johnson's, which is in the mid-60 percentile, and so they're wondering whether or not they should actually take any vaccine if you know you can get the better one if you got Pfizer or Moderna, for instance. And so when you look at just those numbers, they don't tell the full story, because what happens in these clinical trials, especially for the Johnson & Johnson one, is that the Johnson & Johnson clinical trial was run at a later time, and because of it being run at a later time, there were more opportunities for the virus to mutate. The COVID-19 virus took on different variants, like the UK variant or the South African variant, and because of this, the vaccines that were being developed for the earlier strains of the COVID-19 virus weren't going to be as effective against the viruses that were out there in the clinical trials that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was run on. So basically Johnson & Johnson was at a disadvantage in these clinical trials due to the fact that it was run at a later time. Now, that aside, the main important thing here to note is that in every single one of these clinical trials, within the subset of patients who got the active vaccine, whether that was Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, or Moderna, if you were hospitalized and you were vaccinated, none of those patients ended up dying. So basically, the primary reason that a lot of people have for getting this vaccine is that you don't want to die. It's accomplishing its goal regardless of whichever vaccine you got, because there has not been a case in which someone who has been vaccinated with any of these vaccines actually ended up dying from getting infected with COVID-19. In addition to not dying, which I think is the main reason most people care, is that it's making you a lot less likely to ever even have to get hospitalized in the first place, and that's what that efficacy number is referring to. So in the case of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, within their clinical trial, what they did is they basically stopped the clinical trial once they reached 100 confirmed cases of COVID-19. They look at, within that subset of 100 cases, how many people were getting the vaccine, how many people were getting the placebo. They found that basically only 4 or 5 people in that group were taking the real vaccine, and then the remaining people, the 95 people, were people who were getting the placebo, which is basically what would happen if you didn't get the vaccine at all. So in that case, what we're seeing is that we had a dramatic reduction in hospitalizations, but again, this was before there was the new variants out of COVID-19. And so the important thing to make note of here is that even in that Johnson & Johnson trial, where among that subset of 100 patients who got COVID-19, say 35 of them who were actually taking that vaccine, within that group of 35 people, none of them ended up dying, because that vaccine, even though they still needed to get hospitalized, was able to help their body enough fight off the disease so that they didn't end up dying from it. And so that's the very important thing to make note of here, is that the best vaccine is whichever one you can get. That is the most important take-home message here. And from a societal perspective, it helps reduce the burden on these hospitals, because as long as we have a group of people who continue to take and get these vaccines, we're going to be reducing the burden on these hospitals, which will allow them to take care of other people and not be overflowing with patients. So that's going to wrap things up for this video. I hope it helps. Please all be safe, and I'll talk to you next time.